So what's up? This is the Creatures of the Night, and the voice that you hear at this exact moment is Chris, aka Trisha, aka the one that screams around ghosts. And the other voice that you'll sometimes hear when I allow her to get a word in is the lovely Wendy, aka Trina, aka great TV advice giver.
I was hoping you had a nickname ready for me because I didn't prepare with one.
No, I surprised you with that one because I totally took your advice and I watched the Rob Riggle Global Investigator show. That is my new favorite show. I cannot get enough. Look, I don't laugh out loud that often by myself. Like my son was upstairs and he came downstairs just to see what was going on. Of course, I'm laughing my ass off. The show is so funny. And he watches it and he's like, huh. And then he goes back upstairs. I'm like, no, it was so much funnier than that. So I decided to burn through all of these episodes, and not just because I'm like, what else is there to watch? No, just because it was so funny. And my husband comes in. I had already given him the rundown. I'm like, this is like what Josh Gates, he needs to watch this show so that he understands what's missing from his show. And no offense to Josh Gates. I love him. But this dude was so hysterically like silly, funny, and historic. He's like spot on comedic, right?
Yes, his timing is perfect. He's a really, really good comedian. He's hilarious. But he actually seems to invest interest in what he's exploring. He really does give you good information. You know, he acts silly and stuff, but then at times you can see a serious face.
Yes.
So he appears to be an intelligent person that's just really fucking funny.
He really is. I think it was the very first episode. Maybe it's the second. I've already lost track of them. But they're looking for the Holy Grail. And he's out there in some cemetery talking to some guy who's giving him great information. Like I was hanging on every word. And he just like puts his hand up and walks away. But his voice comes over. And it's clearly a voiceover. He's not saying it to that dude's face. But he's like, I had to walk away because that dude was making me sleepy. I'm like, stop it.
I also died laughing when that happened. It speaks to my heart.
Yes.
That's kind of how I am. Like if I try to read at night before bed, that is my night-night medicine. I am just like 5 minutes in, like.
Yeah, me too. So well said. I love that night-night medicine. But it's stuff like that that really turns me on to a program. It's just, first of all, it's very historic. He's going to some crazy locations and he's adding such a tremendous amount of humor to it. So I was just hooked. And even the intro. I've watched the intro now 4 or 5 times because I can't remember which show I'm on. But he gets to this part where he's asking the guy in full Renaissance gear about butt sponges. And he just smiles because they haven't been like trademarked yet or something.
Right. He's got a plan for that. Yeah, that cracks me up every single time too. And I think one of my kids asked what was a butt plug or something. What is it? A butt sponge. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Not plug. Still not great. I did not answer the question.
Right.
What? Never heard of it. No, and even after like when he's introing somebody that he's interviewing, you have to read what's being put on the screen because he says their name and what they're actually known for or whatever. And then he puts under like something ridiculous.
Yes, the one that you had talked about him going to Tombstone, and he got this, I don't know, archaeologist guy to come with him and kind of like show him the ropes or whatever, who was also a pretty funny guy. But what Wendy had just said, like you have to read all of the descriptions under their names. And when he gets to like the very last one, it said something like, does not know any movie Rob Riggle has been in or something like that.
I barely know any movie he's been in.
Oh my God. He was in The Other Guys, which is like a super favorite around here. Like when I was showing Brandon who he is, he's like, oh, he's in The Other Guys. I'm like, yes. He's like, you remember him, right? I'm like, yes, of course I remember him. But anyways, I just wanted to point out that, guys, Wendy has great taste and take her advice on these shows because that is my new favorite show for sure. I'm in love with it.
Did you see the one where he actually did some like paranormal investigating?
That was the last one that I saw where he ran into this guy and he's like, why are you dressed like Jon Snow?
Right.
And then the guy was about to tell him some Game of Thrones stuff and he's like, no. I'm not even caught up. So no spoilers.
But yeah, he did some paranormal investigating in that one. And I thought of you while I was watching. I was like, oh my God, I hope she is watching this show because this is going to be so great.
Oh, yeah.
He's so into whatever people, you know, they're like, we're going to do this to investigate. Mm-hmm. He's like, okay, let's go.
Yes. So that was really cool that he did do some paranormal investigating. I love that they just kind of left him out there. And he's like, okay. And then he just went for it. He just starts asking questions. I'm like, dude, this is gold. I love it.
Yeah.
So aside from Rob Riggle's Global Investigator, I have been watching a lot of TV lately, more than usual, because I don't usually have time to watch TV. And it turns out I really do like TV. How about that? So I got to finish watching The Outsider, which was on HBO. That's a Stephen King, I don't know, short story turned into series. It's really interesting. I mean, I really liked it. Brandon, my husband, thought it was a little slow, but it's a, kind of like a paranormal series. So I liked it. Everything except for the very last episode, which is probably not a good way to intro something. Maybe not take my advice on recommended series to watch. But I liked
in the end, you will be disappointed.
You'll be disappointed in the end. They do leave it open, so you think that there's probably going to be more. I don't know. I haven't read anything to see if there's any more. I didn't even know about this being a Stephen King story or whatever until after I started watching it. So I thought it was pretty good. I don't want to give too many details away. It's a new one. And if you like Stephen King, then you'll probably like that series. I also got around to watching Tiger King on Netflix.
Oh my God, I can't believe you watched it. I was going to ask you about it. And I was thinking, you never watch TV. You never have time. That's what you'll tell me. And there's no way she'll want to sit through this crap. So it had been in social media and stuff. I'd seen the memes. I even kind of asked around. I already kind of knew what the story was about. And I wasn't that interested in watching it. But I had nothing else. And I thought, well, fuck it. Everybody's talking about it. I should see what it's about. And right away I was like, I gotta see how this shit played out. I mean, even though I knew the end result already.
It was a fucking train wreck that I could not stop looking at.
That's
every
exactly
minute
what
of it
is, yeah.
I saw the social media blasts about it too. It seems like every, famous person that's out there got on the bandwagon to immediately try to boycott the series on Netflix. And I understand, yes, you have to go into this knowing that there are animals being harmed. This series doesn't show it explicitly. And I don't think that by you turning on a program that's on Netflix that any of this money is actually going to any of these villains that are being portrayed in the series. It's just a show on Netflix. I mean, there's hundreds of villainous series out there on Netflix. It's just that this one happens to be so damn good. I might go and watch it again. The shit was crazy. Every character in this show was a villain. Not one single person was a good person.
That's the truth. All of them are fucking guilty of something.
Yes, all of them are guilty of something. And maybe that's why, to me, I couldn't look away. You keep expecting, someone to be like the shining star here. And nope.
I take that back. I don't know his name. But one of the zoo managers, the one that he has 2 prosthetic legs, they're really cool looking. That was the most honest fucking guy, in my opinion. And I don't know him for real. Maybe he isn't. He was driving a really flashy car at the end. I don't know where he got that shit from. But he seemed like the most genuine person.
And I also liked the guy that was doing his campaigning, his campaign manager. I liked him. I felt really bad for him and everything that had happened. But, I would recommend it. I messed up when I was talking to my dad about the series. And I'm like, have you seen The Lion King? And my dad's like, you haven't? I was like, no, I meant The Tiger King. Darn it. Not The Lion King. My dad was outright refusing. I am not going to watch it. I'm like, oh, you're missing a good one. Just saying. It's interesting.
It's that train wreck that you can't look away from.
Yeah. And it's also because there's that air of mystery to it, there's this, they bring in almost not a forensic files aspect to it, but there is this unsolved case that it seems has gone cold, that they're not really looking into it anymore. And the more you watch the series, and I'm sure it's the way that they shot everything or the way they filmed everything, that woman seems very guilty. I mean, she just does the weirdest, most bizarre shit, like the way she trails off and kind of laughs when she's talking about her missing husband. I'm like, dude, you did it.
Oh, she did it. She did it for sure. But then there's other questions about who burned down the alligator house? Was it Joe or was it someone else? I mean, they do leave a mystery on these other aspects of the story as well. But, and this is a problem that I've had with Netflix because what was that other one? Making a Murderer or something like that? I could not watch it after a while. When you start to think about, they are only showing you how they want the story to play out.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the same thing with these guys, though everybody seemed fucking guilty.
Yeah.
But much like your Outsider show, the end, to me, was disappointing. Not because there wasn't necessarily a resolution, but at the end, you're like, all of you fucking suck. I hate this whole thing. And then you find out, which this is my stupidity that I didn't know this beforehand, that places like this still exist. Yeah. Like, I thought that they have cracked down on these things.
Yeah, right.
And the fact that some of these guys are still out there and operating, I'm like, oh, fuck. I hate this.
Yeah. So that is definitely a negative to it. And you're right. A lot of documentaries that you can find are going to be one-sided. And I loved Making a Murderer. Actually, I fell in love with it mostly because I felt so bad about Brandon Dassey, who was the kid and all of that. Whether he had anything to do with actually what had happened or not, I don't know. I just hate any kind of interrogation style that it brings in a child without a parent and boom, you're done. And then they're going to use whatever video footage that they took basically, and use it against you. So that was the one thing that from Making a Murderer that I took and still have a hard time with it. The other guy, I don't even remember his fucking name, the actual Making a Murderer guy, because I wasn't that invested in him. And he was the whole hit of the series. Like I said, was brokenhearted about the kid mostly, and that's why I know who he is. But yeah, and I think on Tiger King, I feel like maybe they tried to make you feel like, look, Joe Exotic's not that bad because look at all these other villains. No, he's pretty bad. Everything he did is bad.
Yeah, at the end, there was a softening to him by showing how he was when he originally started the zoo and that he seemed to actually care about them. And now he's working with PETA to, like, get these other guys. But he's just doing it out of spite, more than likely. Yeah. I mean, like, you see what a hateful guy is. He's fucking nuts. He was threatening a woman's life on TV, on camera, getting it on the internet. You can't say shit like that. And he did it all the time. Crazy.
Right. He went for it. And nobody was really slapping his hand. They were trying to. They were trying to say, dude, you should hold up. Maybe think about some of these things that you're doing. But he just went full force. Yeah. So again, I don't feel bad for him, man. You need to learn. You can't do that kind of crazy shit. Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, I think it's worthy of sitting down and binging. What was it, like 8 episodes, maybe 7? It didn't even seem like it was that long of a series.
7 or 8 episodes.
Yeah.
I would recommend definitely watching it as well. I can't believe you watched it, but I'm glad we got to talk about it.
You know what happened? My husband, so he's still going fishing and stuff, and I'll go with him every now and then because he's finding these kind of obscure fishing places where there's nobody around, so I can kind of walk around and at least get outside and get some fresh air. And we were heading to one of these locations last weekend or the weekend before. I don't even remember. And he puts his phone in my face, which is not uncommon. This is how he is. He's like, got something for you. Watch it. And I was even telling him, like, dude, I haven't been out of the house in a week. Let me look outside. Let me please. So he puts the phone in my face and it's the start of the Tiger King series. And I was just like, you go on. Go. I'm not leaving. I am hooked.
Just something to add to what you just said. I sit outside, and especially since I've had more time off lately, I sit outside a lot to edit our podcast or to work on my stories. My face is just in my computer the whole time. And then all of a sudden I look up and I'm like, oh, it's really pretty out here. It's like I forgot I was even there.
That's pretty funny. You're like, wow, outside is beautiful. Now let me go back to my computer.
Yeah, I know. I was like, well, 5-minute break over.
All right. You actually need that to reduce the strain on your eyes, right? Like you're supposed to look away.
Yeah, that's what the doctor told me. So I have to try to remind myself to do that. But then I find myself being shocked of how pretty it is outside every time.
I think that's lovely. I need that also, but I guess I need Arizona in the background because when I look away from my computer, it's like kitchen wall, husband head. All right, going back.
You'll be out on that porch soon enough.
I know. I got the swing mostly up. I just couldn't get the big heavy part up. I have to have my husband and my son do that. So everything else is ready to go. So soon I'll be out amongst the trees. But another thing that I discovered while I've had some time to reminisce, something funny, and I have to revisit the subject. I brought it up before on a podcast, but I didn't bring any clarity to it. And how this all kind of came to me was really interesting. So this is Monson Village. It's a ghost town that's in Milton, New Hampshire. Now, I brought this up previously, but I couldn't remember the name of it. I told you about this location. This is how Chris travels story. And, basically my family and I had all went off to go explore this historic place. Like I said, it's a ghost town. And then we get near it and my husband's kind of like, okay, so Chris, where do we go? There's no signs, just a lot of fields. And, I was waiting for my sixth sense to kick in, right? So that is Monson, New Hampshire. And I'm not going to go super deep into the story, but just for a little bit of background on it, it's a place that became abandoned rather suddenly and only after 40 years after it was officially a settlement. The sudden disappearance really seemed odd, but it was later said to have been because of bad soil. And we just went there because it's supposed to be haunted, But it's also a cool place to hike around. You can see the areas of where the structures used to be. There's a lot of marked ruins. It's a nice little day trip. And of course, I have that funny little story to go along with it. But anyways, why I just realized that I needed to fully come back and explain that a little bit because I just downloaded another Stephen King book. This time, it's Salem's Lot. Right in the beginning, the narrator is setting up the story for you, and he mentions this little town in Vermont where everyone had just suddenly disappeared. And you know what the fuck it's called? Monson. And this Monson, Vermont, sounded an awful lot like Monson Village in New Hampshire. So, when I'm listening to him narrate, I was like, oh, yeah. I just had all of these, I got to tell everybody about it because I'd already made this huge joke about don't leave Chris to navigate you guys anywhere because she's going to, use her sixth sense to get there. Mm-hmm. But it was this location. And when he's talking about it in the book, I was super excited. So I had to relive that for you. But my story is not on the abandoned Monson Village or even Salem's Lot. But strangely enough, it all just tied in so well with what I'm going to tell you. So if you like Stephen King, then you're in the right place because I have an interesting story for you. As I've said before, Stephen King has a way of getting into your head with his horror and just kind of burrowing down and taking a little nap there. And and then every now and then a memory of something you read of his just pops back into your mind just to let you know that, yeah, that was creepy. So of King's classics, Pet Sematary was the first book I actually listened to on audio. And as you all know, this is a horror story from 1983, which later became a very terrifying movie and then remade in 2019. I think that was because it was such a damn good story that when even Stephen King said himself of all of his stories, it scared him the most. One of the most memorable and frightening scenes from the movie was undoubtedly when Zelda, the terminally ill, dark family secret, appears in the movie in this very twisted up way and freakishly convulses as she reaches out to torment her sister Rachel. It's creepy. Wendy knows this.
Super creepy. But, he knows how to make images that will just burn into your mind. Like all of a sudden you could just get a flash of something horrible. And it's usually coming from him.
You're just like, oh, that's great. Well, I was about to go down that dark alley by myself, but not now.
Well, he's just like walking into a creepy old room or whatever. You've never been there before. You're like, this could be behind the door. Just so you know, these are the things that can happen.
Yes. And because I've also been through it, now anytime I'm near like a lake or a park, I'm just like, now, can I please have someone here with me now? Thank you. But one part from Pet Sematary that really burrowed down in my head was a part that didn't even make it into the original movie. It was only in the book and then in the remake of the movie. So if you haven't read the story or seen the remake, then my friends, I apologize for this little spoiler because the part that I'm referring to is the Wendigo. Yes. So I told Wendy, I don't know, a week or 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago that I wasn't going to do this story, but I just had to.
You have to.
So here you go. You're going to get the full, what I decided to leave in here is the full story of the Wendigo.
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So in the Stephen King novel, Pet Sematary, the journey that Judd and Lewis Creed take beyond the children's pet cemetery to the stony Micmac burial grounds is much farther and way creepier than the original film interpreted it. The dangerous deadfall Judd takes Lewis Creed over is only the beginning as they walk for 3 more miles. And through an area that Judd confirms as being the place where the Micmac tribe had referred to as Little God Swamp. And this was a place of nightmares. It was incredibly spooky, full of quicksand, strange lights, and disturbing sounds. Halfway through Little God's Swamp, Judd stops Lewis and listens to the sound of breaking branches as something moves towards them. Despite being frozen in fear, Judd urges them on ahead to the burial ground, only to later come clean about what he really thought was in the woods. He explains that the burial ground was abandoned way, way, way back in the day, once one of the Micmacs claimed to have seen a Wendigo there. Judd implies that the Wendigo is that of an evil spirit, and the Micmacs use the term metaphorically to explain how they would turn towards cannibalism during particularly harsh winters. They felt that the Wendigo would walk through the village while they slept, and whoever it touched would develop a taste for human flesh. The evil spirit cursed their burial ground, causing it to turn sour, and those that were buried there would return from the dead. And there's your explanation for the story. Just blame the Wendigo.
But so they pass it, right? And they're like, he thinks they're in a safe zone. And he's like, this is what I thought we might have encountered. How the fuck y'all supposed to get back to the house? You're going to probably walk that same way. You could have saved that story until tomorrow morning over coffee.
In the book, that's how it goes down. Judd doesn't say shit to Lewis Creed until they get back. And they're like, okay, whew, we made it through there. Let me lay it out for you. This is some shit. The book is way creepier than the movie. I'll give it that. Because like I was talking about seeds being buried, into your head, like I couldn't stop thinking about this Wendigo. And when I saw the remake of the movie, I'm like, okay, well, I'm happy that they loosely mentioned it, but come on. I mean, it was a much bigger part to me anyways in the book than they brought it out to be in either of the movies. And maybe they just didn't want to, I don't know. It's a creepy movie. It's full of lore. Did they not want to invest too much in it? I don't know why they kind of glazed over it like they did.
I imagine it's a time restraint thing. Like, we can't go into
that's
this.
True.
This
that's
requires a lot of, explanation, and you can go way off with it.
Yeah. So I guess that's what they did. But me being who I am, of course, I get that little bug. And I'm like, I got to start researching this a little bit more. So off to the internet I went looking for some Wendigo stories. And let me just tell you, they're frightening. According to the legends, the Wendigo could be one of two things. The first possibility is that it's a physical being, a hideous monster that is said to stalk the northern woods, desperate to satisfy its unfathomable hunger. Sometimes it's been described as having the head of a stag, and other times it was closer to being a monstrous human, which was constantly starving. I mean, that's me. So am I a Wendigo?
Maybe.
It was sometimes said to grow in proportion to the size of the meal it had just consumed, making it impossible for it to ever eat its fill. One particularly jarring description noted that its lips were described as tattered, and it was said that it smelled like death and corruption. So I take that back. I am not a Wendigo. I do not smell like death or corruption.
I don't know. Sometimes.
I know. Wendy's been to some paranormal investigations with me. Late.
We spent long car rides together.
You know. So in other stories, a Wendigo is a malevolent spirit that takes control of men's bodies, cursing them with an incurable need to consume human flesh. It was said that this spirit could possess a person who was overcome with selfishness or greed, leading them to acts of cannibalism. Like many cryptozoological monstrosities, the Wendigo has its roots in a variety of cultures, originating in the northern regions of North America with the folklore of the Algonquin indigenous peoples. The term Algonquin, in this case, refers less to a single tribe of Native Americans and more to a subset of cultures based mostly around Canada, the Northeast U.S. coast, and the Great Lakes regions. Among the dozens of tribes included in the blanket definition are the Cree, the Ojibwe, and the Innu. Many of these societies shared similar dialects and, importantly, the life experiences inherent in a life spent in the punishing climate of the North. Starvation and exposure to the elements were very real dangers. And as with any culture, fears gave birth to stories and mythological personifications of possible threats. Different groups had different variations on the myths, but one thing always stayed the same: the all-consuming hunger that drove it to take the lives of the unwary. And, unfortunately, after doing my homework, I've learned that it's almost impossible to escape a Wendigo once it's fixated on you. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. It's just...
Are you laughing because you think you can outrun it? Always hang out with people a little chunkier than you?
Right?
Don't they look tasty?
Right, I like that.
Not me.
Not me.
I smell, remember?
They might like that.
They might.
So they are relentless in their pursuit of food and unaffected by the punishing elements of the cold northern forests. So that's, I guess, why I was giggling, because I'm screwed. I moved out here to get away from those spiders. Now I'm just closer to Wendigo. Damn it. So some sources say you're no better off if you make it to a shelter. Wherever you go, the creature will follow you, raking at you with grasping claws, tirelessly pursuing the despairing hope that you will be the meal that finally gives it satisfaction. I mean, I feel like that every time I go to Five Guys.
It's kind of sad, though. It's just so hungry.
All the time. Can you imagine that too? Like, okay, so you eat something, then all of a sudden now you're like bigger and taller. So yeah, of course you're still hungry. But I mean, people eating people, come on, there's better things out there.
I don't know.
When it's like, I don't know.
I've never tried it before. I mean, some people seem to really dig it.
Yeah, well, that's true. I'm actually going to get into that a little bit more. So how does one survive a Wendigo and live to talk about it? Apparently, the beast is said to have a heart made of solid ice, which leaves it vulnerable. If you can get at the creature's heart with a silver blade or stake or bullet and then shatter the heart, then put the shattered heart bits in a silver box, then lock the box and finally bury the box in a graveyard, then maybe, just maybe, the Wendigo will die.
Okay. Lots of silver. Got it. Making a note.
Adding to that, the folks over at mythology.net have a few extra steps that you should take on top of all of those other ones I just mentioned. So you also need to dismember and cremate the body and scatter its ashes in several directions. However, if you find yourself in the midst of a Wendigo, the best thing to do is to keep a roaring fire going to dissuade the icy monster. Bearing this, there's always amulets and charms that you can find mostly on Etsy that'll keep these hungry monsters at bay.
Well, that's easy. All you have to do is have a fire.
Yeah, they don't like fire, apparently. But I did, while I was looking up other ways to keep Wendigo away, there's a lot of like magic circle type things that you can do and a fire. So magic circle and fire, which obviously brought me right to SpongeBob and the anti-sea bear magic circle. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, that's why we are best friends on the same wavelength. I already was like sea bears. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Got it. You know that circle. Done. So we're safe. I think we're safe. Fire and sea bear circle, and we're good. So with all these legends aside, the Wendigo psychosis is a very real term used to describe what happens to people who just up and decide one day to start eating other people. So Wendy's comment that she made just, a couple minutes ago about, I don't know, maybe people are okay.
Maybe I'm a Wendigo now.
Yes, because these people that just up and decide to start eating people, it's not necessarily due to the fact that they're desperate for food. In fact, some of the most famous cases of Wendigo psychosis seem to have sprung up for no reason at all. For just over the span of 40 years, in the 1600s, a group of French missionaries of the Jesuit order traveled through New France, a vast area of North America that is now comprised of Montreal, Quebec, and regions of the United States acquired during the Louisiana Purchase. So on this mission, these men interacted with the indigenous people, hoping to spread Catholicism. They published stories of their encounters in a series of books called The Jesuit Relations, which they used to spread word of their work and attract financial backing. In one particularly horrifying passage, the Jesuits described the ill fate that befell a group of men they were supposed to meet. Reportedly, they had been overcome with a mysterious psychosis, which they all described in detail. And I'm quoting because this is from the book. They become so ravenous for human flesh that they pounced upon women, children, and men like veritable werewolves and devour them voraciously without being able to appease or glut their appetite, ever seeking fresh prey, and the more greedily, the more they ate. Their account continues with, and we're told that the afflicted men had to be executed as this was the only cure for their condition, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not fucking around with that, okay?
He's coming for me. It's like, It's one of the first Western accounts of Wendigo psychosis in action. And then, of course, there's Swift Runner. Now, he's the reason I almost didn't do this story, because one other thing I'm catching up on during quarantine is the lore podcast. Another thing that I fell seriously behind on back when I was having to actually go to work. And as I'm listening to one of Aaron Mahnke's stories, lo and behold, he's talking about Swift Runner. So anyways, Swift Runner, his story might ring a few bells if you already, listen to lore. But this guy was generally a well-liked person, being a member of the Cree tribe and also having worked as a guide for the local mounted police. But by the end of 1878, he had taken his family to the woods and walked right into macabre history. The next time he was seen in public was the spring of 1879. He claimed his entire family, including his wife and 6 kids, had all died of starvation during the harsh winter months. But the police at Fort Saskatchewan, however, couldn't help but notice that the man himself didn't look like he had missed any meals. They decided to visit his campsite and look into this strange story. And there is where they discovered a grisly sight. Bones picked clean of meat, some of the marrow hollowed out, and a skull with a shoe jammed inside it.
What?
I don't know. He was confronted about the crime, and he confessed to killing all of them and eating them.
He's like, okay, you got me. But do you like my shoe art? No? Gosh.
I set that up for you. So Swift Runner's story went on to become the go-to example of Wendigo psychosis, since it's believed that he had access to means of survival besides slaughtering and consuming his entire family. The full truth will probably never be known, and the world's most famous Wendigo was executed in late 1879 in Alberta's first government-sanctioned hanging. Now, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, there was a shaman known as Jack Fiddler. He was a holy healer with a particularly sought-after skill set. Jack could fight Wendigos.
He had a certification and everything.
Go get Jack. There's another damn Wendigo around.
How do you sell that shit to them? And he has a silly name for a shaman, in my opinion, but I don't know. I'm just being judgmental.
Maybe he really did fiddle. And they were just like, well, you are what you do, or whatever. You don't want to be what you eat in this episode.
No.
So Jack claimed to have stopped as many as 14 Wendigos in his life by euthanization. When people felt the curse of the Wendigo beginning to overpower them, they would send for the holy man to end their misery before they could do any real damage. As it was the turn of the century, tribal traditions were beginning to go by the wayside, and when the Canadian government got wind of this mystical cannibal fighter, they didn't much agree with the idea of spiritual medicine by way of execution.
That doesn't even sound like the two of them go together. I mean,
No.
Shouldn't he have had like a spell or some procedure to perform? Not just like, I got this, and inject them with poison? Wow, That seemed like the easy way out. I thought you were going to like kill them or something.
Yeah, you would think by shaman, holy man, that there would be some healing going on. But not with this Jack Fiddler guy.
Yeah.
He was about getting rid of the Wendigo, but that's it.
Killing people. Got it.
So the Mounties were sent in to investigate and discovered a woman who had been strangled to death in order to pull the people-eating spirit out of her. Jack and his brother were arrested for murder, but before he could be executed, the shaman escaped from jail and he killed himself. I guess he was also a Wendigo. The indigenous people in northern New England believed in similar creatures, although they didn't call them Wendigos. Back in the day, they were actually called Chinus, Giwakwa, or Kiwakwa. Like Wendigos, Chinus are gigantic and emaciated, but they are also lipless because they were said to have hungrily chewed off their lips.
Do you kind of feel bad for them?
I mean, honestly, I chew on my lips constantly. That's why I'm always putting chapstick on there, too.
Well,
they get
I
dry.
Told you, you're a Wendigo probably.
Now we know. So Chinos apparently got their power from a human-shaped lump of ice that has replaced their heart. So you see there's similarities there between the Chinus and the Wendigos. There are, of course, loads of gruesome Chinu stories out there. However, I thought I'd lighten the tone a bit and tell you this story that I plucked from the pile because it's actually kind of amusing. This story comes out of a book from 1884. Charles Godfrey Leland's The Algonquin Legends of New England. Have you heard this one?
I read it every night before I go to bed. I've gotten to page 3.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and give you the whole story right here. Many years ago, a young newlywed couple set off to spend the winter in the woods. They were following the traditional pattern of their people, where the tribe would come together in the summer and fall when food was plentiful, then split into smaller units during the winter when food was scarce. The couple set up camp by a river deep in the forest. One day while her husband was out hunting, the wife heard something large stomping around outside her tent. Oh, lo and behold, it's a Chinu. He stuck his head into the tent and glared at her hungrily. Thinking quickly, the woman said, "Welcome, father." The Chinu had been planning to eat her, but was so surprised at being addressed so politely, she invited the monster to come in and sit by the fire. When she heard her husband approaching, she ran outside and explained that there's a Chinu inside their home, and he also addressed the Chinu as father. The Chinu was so pleased that it declared it would not eat them, at least not immediately, and then it just moved on in with them. This dude was a freeloader. The Chinu lived with them for many weeks. In some ways, it was quite helpful. For example, since it was so tall, the husband would ride upon its back while hunting game. It also offered protection against other Chinus that roamed through the woods. The young couple once watched it in amazement as their Chinu killed a rival Chinu that wanted to eat them. Then they watched in horror as their father ate its corpse. Despite all these sweet benefits, they realized that at some point they too would anger the Chinu and it would eat them. The next day, the woman made a mixture of water and salt and offered it to the Chinu as a beverage. The Chinu greedily drank it down and almost immediately vomited up a human-shaped lump of ice. This was the heart of the dead rival it had recently eaten, and the woman immediately threw it onto the fire. The Chinu shrank in size and vomited up another human-shaped ice lump. Clearly, her father had been busy eating other Chinus. The woman also tossed this into the fire as well. Finally, the Chinu vomited up a third icy lump and transformed into a little old man. As the woman went to toss the ice into the fire, the former Chinu grabbed her hand. "Daughter, wait," he cried. "That is my heart. I will die if it melts." He took it from her and swallowed it down. Due to the efforts of the woman, the Chino was cured. And I guess they all just lived very creepily, happily ever after, because that's it. I don't know what Charles Godfrey Leland was attempting to, teach you there. Chinus can be cured or they're useful to have around. But apparently, in his mind or in his story, you don't necessarily have to kill them. You can just give them water with salt until they puke up their icy hearts. And everything will be straight. You just have a live-in old man after done.
Oh, this sounds much easier, definitely to remember, than the long list of things you told me a minute ago that I can't remember any of it, except for it was a lot of silver involved, which is not easy necessarily to come by, not real silver. So I like this idea. So if I see them or they try to eat me, I'm just going to invite them to live with me for a while.
Yeah, and benefits, dude, because, first of all, you've got a Chinu eating Chinu already on hand. I mean, I don't know. Do you have to walk them? I'm sure they can't be trained to use the bathroom. So
no, you ride them. Didn't you hear that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're going to ride one to work now and
Fuck yeah. Nobody fuck with me at work.
I got my Chinu.
My Chinu will eat you. And then at some point, you just give them salt water. Yep. When you're like, I'm getting kind of concerned that I don't have enough to feed you around this house anymore.
Right. Yep. Then you shrink them down to, maybe it depends. Maybe it'll sometimes be a little old lady. Sometimes it's a little old dude. I don't really know.
Whatever. But they don't eat much, and they go to bed really early, so they're out of your hair. So
sounds like a win-win. So moral to the story is don't try to kill them. Just try to befriend them. Be super cool with them. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah. Kill them with kindness. You killed the Chinu with kindness.
So then there are a handful of actual Wendigo sighting stories in and around Maine. Clearly, since the Wendigo story that brought me to researching them was from the Stephen King story. But there's many more throughout Canada and in Minnesota. There's even a little lake called Lake Wendigo, where at one point Wendigo ceremonies had been performed during times of famine to remind the good people to be wary of the Wendigo spirits.
Remind them not to eat each other.
Right.
Probably more so what it was about. Don't be a fucking Wendigo.
Don't be a fuckhead. Don't eat your neighbor. Come on.
Times are about to get tough, but we can get through this together.
Now, while I'm looking further and further into this legend and I'm reading stories of people's encounters, there's everything from the family picnic sightings to Grandma's got one living in her shed. Well, of course Grandma's got one living in her shed. She read that story too.
Yeah. She's like, I'm going to get me a best friend. We're going to knit together at the end of this.
Aww. But some of those stories were actually pretty scary. Think of the show I Survived, but with a Wendigo. So anyways, while I'm listening to my latest book on audio, again, that's Stephen King's Salem's Lot, one of the characters in the story just happens to yell out, "Careful, or you'll get put in Augusta State." And I swear, timing, dude, it's fucking everything. Because I'm playing around on the internet, Googling shit about Wendigos, and I just happened to come across this set of abandoned buildings in Maine called the Augusta Mental Health Institute. But it wasn't always known as the hospital, originally being built as the Kennebec Arsenal. Now, this place, it's several stone buildings that were built to serve as a major arsenal after the War of 1812. The site in Augusta, Maine was chosen because of its easy access to the Kennebec River. Now, the arsenal was in use until 1901 when it officially closed its doors. The property was then sold to the Maine State Hospital, which then became home to Maine's mentally ill. The Maine State Hospital, later renamed the Augusta Mental Health Institute, or AMHI for short, closed up its operations at the old arsenal in 2004. The site was later sold off to a developer, though it's been sitting vacant and deteriorating ever since then. But going back to while it was under the control of AMHI, the property became a very terrifying place. Former patients of the hospital recall horrific incidents in which other patients were randomly found dead. And of the 11,647 people who died during their stay at the Augusta Mental Health Institute, where they were buried remains a mystery. This is due to the hospital's lack of keeping detailed records on where they buried those people.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow is right. And of course, because it's an old institute in New England, there's also a whole series of underground tunnels. Now, this place is not just historic and creepy as fuck, and possibly a good Wendigo hideout. It's also been referred to as Maine's most haunted location. But as far as evidence goes, there's not much. Kind of like what I was finding when I was looking up Wendigo evidence.
I don't know that you want to find Wendigo evidence.
No, that's true. They're not like puppies. It's not like, oh, let's go look at pretty cute little puppies. And there's evidence of puppies everywhere. You're right. I don't really want to see that.
It's kind of like, I hope that's actually not true. Just like the vampires.
Ooh.
But is it because it's just too dangerous to explore it for people to get out there to try to get evidence?
So yeah, you're exactly right. There have been only a handful of ghost hunters that got access to it, but the majority of explorers posting videos on this place are my other favorite breed, urban explorers. They know how to get it, man. These people are just going in for the experience of seeing these buildings in their full decaying beauty. They bring respiratory masks, not cans of spray paint. They have some of the highest quality cameras and lights in order to document the look and the feel of these abandoned places, not to steal or vandalize anything. And even though they aren't doing really anything wrong in my book, they are trespassing. So it is rare.
Minor offense.
Minor. But they're not doing anything.
I support it for an educational cause.
Yes, definitely. That's all we're doing. Supporting for the education of it all. But because they've got the no trespassing signs and you know that what you're doing is breaking the law, it's rare to find that information on a place like this that gives you all of the nitty gritty, the goods, about the haunting at a location, right? So that's just what you were suggesting. It's hard for people to get in there. There's no one that's like, yeah, let's book it. Come on in. No, the place is falling apart. I mean, if you go in there, go in knowing that you could get seriously hurt.
With paranormal investigating, you have to spend like hours sitting around fucking waiting if you want to document this stuff. And urban explorers are not going to take like that kind of time. That's not what it's about. It's about getting in and out because it's illegal to be there. So I get that.
So it is rare in some cases to find the full name and location spelled out along with those people's names on YouTube, you know, they want to show you the world that they found, but they don't want to get on the Popo's radar. So having said that, this could be why I've had a hard time finding out evidence that would help to confirm the state's claim that this is Maine's most haunted location. But having said that, I was able to find out what many say are the types of paranormal occurrences that you'll find if sneaking into the abandoned state hospital. Screams of former patients have been heard, in addition to other strange activity documented in the tunnels. The tunnels are supposed to have been closed off, but it seems like they are still accessible through the inside of these buildings. And many of those that have been able to go inside also speak of a feeling of sadness that permeates through those hallways. Quite understandable.
Yes, I bet those screams are horrible to hear.
Yeah, but also pretty cool.
I mean, yes, but also nightmarish.
Oh, yeah. Here I am on this side saying, oh, that would be pretty cool. If I heard a fucking scream in an abandoned building, I would shit my pants. I would lock up. I don't even know if I would run. I'd probably just lock up.
I know. We'd turn into the ghosts because we wouldn't be able to get the fuck out of there.
No kidding. There's also very vague reports of the appearance of apparitions and other strange noises on the ground. But again, it's hard to physically prove any of this when you're trying to be sneaky about being there in the first place. So what I have to add to this is that I watched this fabulous 2-part YouTube series by a group of guys called The Proper People. I guess it's just their name out there on YouTube, so look them up. They're phenomenal. They've gone into lots of abandoned places. So if you want to get on a kick of watching that, that's a good one to go down. They filmed their illegal spelunking event at the hospital, and they were not there to investigate the paranormal by any means. But these 3 guys, which I do not have their names, and I don't know if that's because I'm a bad investigator or if it's because they were trying to remain anonymous. So for my story's benefit, I'm just going to make up their names.
Okay.
So when you go looking up their videos, you're like, hey, that's not their names. But anyways, they all hear this female crying sound, which was also picked up on their audio. Now, again, these guys are just like filming the decaying building. They're not there investigating ghosts. It happened as they all entered into this very large room, possibly a cafeteria. It's very creepy. And you can tell that it bothered them. They all also start to hear what they say sounded like a mechanical voice, like what you'd hear coming over a loudspeaker. But they couldn't determine the cause. And they even poked their heads outside, but they were pretty sure it was coming from inside the building. One of the guys, we'll just call him Larry, tells the other guy, in this case it's Curly.
Knew where you were going with this right away.
That he doesn't have to worry. And Curly replies with, no, man, I'm not worried at all. I'm scared. So you know who my favorite is. After a few minutes, a strange animal-like noise is heard, and one of the team members, gonna call this one Mo, you already knew where I was going with that. Mo suggested that it was a fox. And they're all like, yeah, okay, I've never heard a fox make a noise like that before, but it's logical. We'll move on.
Do foxes even make noises?
I'm not really sure. I didn't investigate fox noises. I probably should have, but I didn't. They do hear animal noises, but the other voice noise that I said earlier did sound extremely human-like. Don't know what else could have been out there making that noise. And you'll hear those kind of things off and on throughout their investigation. After a while, they find and begin exploring the tunnels. The whole time I'm watching this, like I'm watching a horror movie. Curly stops dead in his tracks and is just filming down a very long, dark tunnel. And when Larry and Mo approach him, he just says, I'm not going any further. There are 2 voices down there, and I've heard them throughout this building, and I don't want to go down there. Mo tries to convince him that this is an open building, and there could be other people just like them down there. And Curly is like, nope, not going.
As if that is supposed to make him feel better.
No, right? Oh, I don't want to see real people either.
No, because they might not be people just like us. They could be people that are trying to live in this nice, probably warmish building in the middle of the woods.
You don't want to run into anybody in a situation like this. It's terrifying. Anyways, these guys are there for the thrill of being in an abandoned location that probably hasn't been seen by many people in a long time, you know. So they're in there filming it, documenting it. The last thing they want to do is run into a real person either. They're not there to fight, you know, or run.
Yeah. It's supposed to be abandoned. That was the main reason. The whole creepy building, tunnels to themselves. When you're hearing voices is problematic.
problematic. So Larry also speaks up at this moment. This is the first time that he admits to also having heard weird voices throughout the building. And these guys, I'm watching this whole thing and they are going everywhere. They found like a theater and they go up to the top of it and they can see out like a balcony. And the whole time I'm just like, get out of there. It's so terrifying. But also I want to see more. They go into like a shower area. Oh, it just gave me put me right back in the woods when we went into that like house in the woods and we go all the way to the back of it where the bathroom was and the shower was. I'm like, what am I doing here?
Because there was actually still a curtain up too.
There was a curtain. Yeah.
No.
Yes. So they run into all of that there. The whole time I was on the edge of my seat watching it. And now that there's two guys that are admitting to hearing weird shit throughout this whole building. I think Mo was just outnumbered at this point. He didn't try to put any logic to it. He's just like, okay, fine. You guys are wigging out. Let's just go. So they peace out. I didn't see any strange apparitions on their footage, though they did admit to seeing things while inside, but they claimed that it was like an animal or possibly their own shadows. I don't know. I think that they might have just been trying to unspook themselves. I don't know how you could see something all the way down a tunnel and be like, yeah, that's just my shadow. Cool. No. So yeah, it's in Maine. And we, of course, had to go and see it. And when I say we, I mean myself. But my husband is always game. My husband is always game for spending a day in the car. So I thought we'd just drive right up and see it. When navigating to the Kennebec Arsenal, it takes you directly to a historic marker that sits in the middle of a roundabout. So here I am again with my husband. We're driving around this roundabout. And he says, just as calm as ever, I can't believe I fell for this again. And I'm like, yeah, because we're just going around in a circle here. I'm like, shit. Well, I actually came out on top this time because as he's starting to get frustrated and we're going around this roundabout, I happen to look out my window and I can see the river right there. And there it fucking is. This abandoned building. Because remember, it was along the Kennebec River and you could see it going through the fucking roundabout. And I'm like, it's right there. It's right there. Just take the exit. Let's go this way. And of course, he's still mad. He's like, no, find me exact directions. I'm like, I see it. Let's just go.
That's the direction where my eyeballs are looking.
It's absolutely beautiful. You know, if you're into old creepy buildings, you can at this time walk around the main hospital, which is extremely visible. Like as soon as you pull into the parking lot, the main hospital is right there. And this is one that doesn't have a fence around it or anything. Like if you wanted to, you could walk up the steps and put your face right on the glass and look all in it if you wanted to. But there are some buildings that are down the road that are off limits. Like they're roped off. They've closed off the roads. You can only see them. And I guess if you're an amazing urban explorer, then you can get in there and do your thing. But me being in the broad daylight and with someone who's super not interested in getting arrested, we can only look at it from afar, right?
What a party pooper.
I know. But one thing I did notice while I was over there is that the power is still on because I saw some lights on a few of these buildings, which probably means cameras.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they do have signs up. I did say earlier, I think, that it is owned by a new company. They were actually, I don't know why, in Augusta, Maine. It doesn't really seem like a big happening spot, but it seems like they were going to use this as like maybe a hotel area. I mean, it's got a nice river view. They would have to, I guess, come to terms with the fact that there's lots of unmarked graves.
Maybe.
There.
Don't even know.
So nothing's happened with the property in years. It's just sat there abandoned. It's really cool to see and also very eerie to see something like that in an otherwise very kind of happening town. I mean, happening, I guess, when it's not so much COVID-19 and everyone's on lockdown. But, you know, it's an older town. It's quaint. There's a lot of like businesses and buildings all kind of cram-packed together, except for this one area. Oh, and from the hospital, the Kennebec Arsenal, you look right across the river and you see the Capitol right there. It's kind of a neat thing. You're standing at a historic location looking at another historic location right across the river.
Yeah, that seems like prime property right there. So I imagine they'll do something with it when they can come to grips with the devils that are left there.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's haunted. So when they do come to terms with that and they build that hotel, I'm going to be staying in Augusta, Maine.
We are going to be staying there.
I know how to get there now. So we drove around Augusta a little bit, taking in some of this cute little town and just going back to Salem's Lot for a minute. In the beginning, there was this introduction from Stephen King himself, where he tells you a little bit about the background on how the story came to be. Wendy already mentioned that on a previous podcast. That was her, oh, thanks for the spoiler, Stephen King. But what caught my attention in his spiel was when he recalls some of the old comic books that he used to pick up as a kid, because some of those were also my favorites too. He started talking about EC Comics' Tales from the Crypt and Tales from the Vault. These were like awesome comics. If you've never seen them before, where have you been? They are just nostalgic as all get out and amazing. But for me, when I was a kid, I was picking these up at a variety shop in Memphis, Tennessee, known as River Records. Meanwhile, Stephen King was picking up his comics at a place in Augusta called the Kennebec Fruit Company. So, full circle. I was like, so that's it. That's I'm not doing a Wendigo story. But, I mean, when it came down to it, I simply couldn't resist, because the journey of exploring the story took me from a book that I really enjoyed to finding an abandoned, haunted location that's somewhat around the corner from me. And now I've always heard how reading will take you places, but damn. This one was like a murder mystery for me, and I was just connecting the dots all over the place. So if you have a story that you want us to share that is from the Kennebec Arsenal or Augusta Mental Health Institute, please write to us and let us know. And if you have a story or want us to cover a specific location you haven't heard about yet, please let us know that too. You can also always find us on social media. Just look for COTN_paranormal on Instagram or COTN paranormal on Twitter and Facebook. I'll link the YouTube video that I mentioned earlier in the show to Twitter, and I'll share all the pictures that I was able to get when I went to the Augusta Mental Health Institute. Of course, it's not going to be anything cool from the inside, but the outside is still just as cool. So I'll be putting those up on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm sure I'll sneak in a few pictures of the Wendigo. Not that I've seen, just from the internet. Oh, but speaking of the Wendigo, if you would like to visit us over at the Spirit Emporium, we do sell smudge kits and protection candles. Remember, they're not big fans of fire. So, and negative spirits really hate that shit too. So stock up on it now. You never know when smudge kits will be disappearing off the shelves like toilet paper is these days.
Oh, wow. Wow. I love that little trip we just took. From allure to murderers to abandoned places. I cannot wait to see this video from Larry, Moe, and Curly.
I know. It's good.
And then all your pictures, because they'll be like in the daylight and stuff. I assume they went at night and everything. So we'll get a really good visual of what the place looks like. I can't believe you went there. That's so awesome.
Oh my God. Like I said, I was just looking up places of the Wendigo, and this just kind of popped up in my feed. And all at the same time, I'm listening to Salem's Lot, and I'm looking at this place online, and they're like, yeah, crazy, you'll get locked up at the Augusta Mental. He's talking about the place I'm looking at that's haunted. What? I was in love with this story from the minute that I first laid my eyeballs all over it. So I'm glad that you liked it. It's a little bit in how Chris's mind works. Take me from a simple little story, such as Pet Cemetery. Simple, right? And we go way, 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 way down a deep, dark path.
I love every bit of it, though. Like, I never thought about that, too. I've actually never heard of that. I've heard of the Wendigo, like, as a lore, and I never knew that they connected it to these murderous patterns as, like, kind of a syndrome that people get. I never thought about that. But it totally makes sense.
It's really creepy when, you do jump from something that's mythological. In a sense, you kind of feel safe because you're like, okay, this was something that came to light based on these stories back in the day.
Right. And all you have to do is give it a glass of salt water.
Right. That's true. Right.
And you're fine.
Right.
And then it's
Puke
like
that little heart.
Yeah, remember a man ate his family. Not just murdered his family. He ate them and then he made art with it afterwards. I guess. I wouldn't call it art.
It depends on your frame of mind, I guess. And he wasn't the only one. He's just the most well-documented guy. He didn't have any reason to do what he did. And yet he's just like, yeah, I don't know about them. They starved to death or something. It's weird.
You think he ate one of them because maybe he was getting a little hungry. So he's like, I'm going to eat one of these children. And then his wife probably caught him and he's like, fuck, I got to eat all of them now.
I'd say it was a rough night. It was probably like very stormy outside. And he's like, shit, I'm not going to have my nachos tonight if I can't go out there. And it's just too cold. And I don't know. That kid right there.
I don't even like that kid.
I thought I was talking back and shit. Yeah. I mean, I think things would be easier if we only had 5 kids. Let's just go ahead and knock this out. Right?
Yeah.
So he did.
And she wouldn't agree to it, and it spiraled out of control because he's probably just like, I can just get me another wife and some more kids.
Yeah, sure. And then have more nachos.
Yeah. It's a lazy fuck that just didn't want to leave the house. And he saw a source of food right there. Mm-hmm. Or he's insane. One or the other. But yeah, I never knew that. I never knew that, they've made this like terminology up before. So that's really fascinating to me. I've only ever thought of it as like a lore.
That's what I thought too. So yeah, while I was taking the ride with my husband to Maine, of course, I was filling him in on all of that. And he loves that part of it because to him, there's a logical explanation behind something that was, magical. In a sense, right? It's something that's mystical, something that you can't really put your hands on it. To him, he's like, yeah, it makes sense to him. Eating people.
You better watch out. It gets really cold there.
I think we're all Wendigos up here. It does get really cold here, and that man does love some nachos.
No, that was a really cool story, though. And like I said, I really, really am excited to see this video by these guys, like the experience they had. You, I would say, accidentally called it an investigation earlier because that's not necessarily what they're there for. They're just there for the experience and to kind of give you a view of the place as a thrill. We got in, look at it, and then they actually end up having this paranormal experience while they're there. And so it kind of does turn into an investigation somewhat.
Somewhat, yeah. They weren't willing to mess around with it, though. They're just like, it's cool because in the video, you'll see that they're checking out these machines that are still fully intact and the copper is still there. And they're like, wow, I can't believe nobody's been in here and destroyed it, taken it apart to sell, And then they're like, what was that?
Now it's starting to make sense.
Right. And I'm like, if you just had an audio recorder with you too, you might be getting EVPs during all of this. Yeah, but it makes sense. Nobody's in there because it's Maine's most haunted location. So it's a cool place. I would love to actually get in there to do an investigation, probably in the daylight, because I've said before I'm clumsy as hell, and there's all sorts of things in there to get hurt on. Lots of rusty nails to get caught on and things of that nature. So, but yeah, if one day exists, then maybe one day we can get in. But that's all that I had for you. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would, please rate and review and subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends to come and listen to us.
Awesome. Yes. Sweet. Please do that. Thank you so much. And that's it.
Stay safe.
And bye.